Hi there, I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. You're about to watch a video describing Virgo Rising, Virgo Lagna, Virgo Ascendant, through the whole sign house system, which is the traditional house system used in Vedic and Hellenistic astrology. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comments section below. And if you like what I'm doing, feel free to check out more of my work by going to dustincormier.com. Hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. Now, we are about to get into the fun stuff. We're only halfway through this presentation here, folks. So, the next thing we're going to start moving through is talking about how other people have defined and described the house lords for Virgo. So let's begin first with one of my very favorite books. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. It's called Light on Life. It's by Hart DeFau and Robert Svoboda. As you can see, I've got pages just falling out of this thing. It's, there's a phrase that my girlfriend's mom told me. It's earmarked, pen written, and tear stained, something like that. It's I've coaxed through this book. I mean once, but like a lot of it I've gone through more than once. It's one of my favorites. Robert Svoboda also has another book. He does the Kundalini 1 and 2, the Agores series. He's a great Vedic mind, and I highly recommend him. So, in this book, the author has a little depiction of the nature of the rising signs, and he goes through it. And this is, again, we're talking about why is Virgo the way Virgo is. When we hear that Virgo is a maiden, there's this shyness. They're this crafty person. It's because Saturn rules the 5th and the 6th. They are, all the things that we know about Virgo are conveyed partly because of the planets that rule the houses. So let's start digging into this in the way that kind of gives us a perspective on things. Now, for everybody can see here, this is Light on Life by Robert E. Svoboda and Hart DeFau. Is an Aries in the 8th house. Did I, let me see here. Niner by Nature 88 is asking, is an Aries in the 8th house? I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to there. I did put the wrong picture in the title page of this video. I put that Aries rules the 11th, and I've fixed it, but I don't think I fixed it in the thumbnail yet, so I think that might be what you're referring to. But yes, Aries comes right after Pisces, and it rules the 8th house for Virgo. So, let's start getting into what does Robert Svoboda and Hart DeFau say about our beloved Virgo rising. Virgo's symbol is a maiden. This indicates shyness, an interest in purity, and a certain lack of skill in worldly matters, even if worldly wise. The maiden holds a sheaf of grain in one hand and fire, a torch, in the other. This may imply food, the service and the hospitality industries, but does not necessarily suggest progeny, for she is a maiden. This is kind of coming down to Saturn, again, ruling the 5th and the 6th house, the 5th house being the house of relating to Leo. There is a cross correlation of the rising sign numerology with the house sign numerology. They're different, but there are resonances. Just like the 3rd house does resonate with Gemini, but it's different in the Vedic understanding. I hope that's clear. So Saturn rules the 5th house and the 6th house, but the 6th house, a negative house, has the Mula Tricona Aquarius. This shows that Virgo often is rather innocent and kind of, they can be, well, it's not a good sign for progeny, according to Vedic astrology, typically. Again, this is just one aspect of things, and if you have a well-placed Saturn, and it has aspects from friends, anybody can do anything, regardless of astrology, and you can have children. But this is an archetype of the innocent maiden who's just a child herself, right? Since Virgo is the 6th house of the natural zodiac, and so indicates disease, and since the sun rules the 12th house for Virgo, the 12th house of hospitals, Virgos tend to be very interested in hygienics and healthcare, which is one sort of service industry. It also relates to the digestive fire that we've talked about, the 6th house, and Virgo holding this little bit of fire.
Hi there. If you've been enjoying this video, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, How to Rock Astrology. Also, I'll be producing my own original brand of literature pretty soon, including a book entitled An Introduction to Tropical Vedic Astrology. To stay up to date with everything I got going on, you can join my email list by going to dustincormier.com/subscribe or going to the link in the description box. If you do so, you'll be able to download a copy of my free ebook entitled Thread, a cosmic short story. Thanks for watching, folks. Now enjoy the rest of the video.
Venus, who is a mutual friend of the rising sign Lord Mercury, rules both the 9th house of higher learning and also the 2nd house of classical learning. The 2nd house relates with very much early childhood in a lot of ways, and it's your ability to be educated. But it's, for Virgo in particular, your general education is tied to your higher education. The 2nd house is really shows how you have the ability to integrate knowledge. Virgo natives tend, therefore, to love classical culture and education. And this is also since Jupiter, who signifies education, rules the 4th house of education. The 2nd house is classical education, the 4th house is general education, and the 9th house is higher education. A lot of this is very connected to Jupiter if you understand Vedic astrology. So Jupiter rules the 4th house, and this shows a desire for Virgos to be just generally very interested in gaining information and knowledge. Virgos are often interested in developing skill at a trade, especially one centered around detail. That's with Mercury being the Lagna lord, the rising sign lord. Mercury being the lord of detail, and also Mercury ruling the 10th house of profession. This is also because Virgo, as the 6th house in the natural zodiac, also represents the trades. A trade of skill and knowledge from one person behind to the person ahead. Mercury, an analytical and calculating planet, is exalted in the ascendant. This is something interesting to be said about Virgo, is that, as we can see, this is the trade-off between Mercury and Venus, which is very interesting, because Venus and Mercury are friends. But we see, as we're going to hear, that, I wonder if he's going to mention it, so I shouldn't even talk about it. Well, in any case, Venus is debilitated in the 1st house, and Mercury is exalted in the 1st house. And this does say something about the nature of Virgo. Mind you, this doesn't mean anything with regards to Venus, but if Virgo rising has an ill-placed Venus, they will have a hard time integrating Venus because their rising sign vibrates to the tone of Venus's debilitation. I believe we're going to talk about that more as we go along. But what we read here is that Mercury, which is an analytical and calculating planet, is exalted in Virgo. It's exalted in its own sign of Virgo, and that's the rising sign here. So when you couple this with the fact that the incisive Mars is the lord of the third house of intelligence, we see that Mercury being exalted in the rising sign gives Virgo natives a propensity for analysis and calculation. So Aries, which represents the head, is a Virgo ascendant's 8th house. And Mars, the ruler of Aries, owns for a Virgo Lagna both the 8th of research and the 3rd, which is this constant satisfaction for more sensual felt experiences in some kind of way, some kind of field. Mars is actually probably the toughest planet for Virgo, as we're going to talk about. So this connection of the head, Aries, with the 8th house causes a Virgo native always to think unusual thoughts. Very interesting. Virgos will also resist following normal procedures, particularly because Mars, the crooked one, has a contrarian nature. 8th house is really a procedural house, and so is the 3rd. The 3rd house has to do with being with following rational reason and logic. And Mars ruling the unstable 8th house, plus the 3rd house, which is supposed to abide by rational reason and logic, Virgo can, especially if their Mars is very well placed, but they will use contrary devil's advocate. They'll think around the situation in order to inform the situation, and it can be very powerful. Virgos do follow a box because that's what Mercury does. They have a precise, detailed, analytical way of moving through things, but they move through the girders that they set up like a serpent, and it makes for the ability to be concise and methodical and analytical in a structured way, but also to move with a serpentine curiosity that cannot be held in too much by structure. It's part of the reason why Virgos are such great analytical researchers, is because they're also playful and intuitive in this way. Not just in the Mercury way, but in this Mars way. These factors, combined with Mercury's debilitation in the 7th house, can promote marital difficulties for Virgo. Also, since the 5th house and 6th house are both ruled by Saturn, a graha who does not indicate children, and being old himself is against children, Virgos may experience difficulties with their children. Now, I know that we're going to hear a little bit more about this, and there is a little bit more to this. Virgos are a sign of digesting the contents of your reality, not necessarily reality outside you, but your reality, the people that you take on, the children that you take on. And Virgos have a way of digesting the ugly, ill parts of the people around them and of their children. This doesn't mean that Virgos are going to necessarily have a bad experience with children. But there is a karma here which conveys that whatever goes on with your children, you are going to have a sensitive, you've got a sensitive stomach because you empathize so deeply with your children. And you want to improve them because the fifth lord and the sixth lord are tied in together. There's a constant desire to improve them, and there's a instinct to improve them in a tough way. And we see that Mercury's debilitation in its own 7th house and Virgo's 7th house shows that Virgos tend to be much more understanding of themselves, and they want to apply rigid, discerning patterns in regards to how they are themselves. But how they are supposed to be with other people, they're blind to it. It's almost like Jupiter ruling the 7th house, and that's where Mercury is debilitated. You can almost see that it's like, I know what I can do with myself, and I know that there are certain aspects of reality that are the unknown. Virgos consider other people to be the unknown. And how does Mercury deal with the unknown? Well, it's playful about it. I don't know how you're supposed to be with me, and I don't know how I am supposed to be with you. So how do I abide? How do I deal with it? With Jupiterian optimism. You just be you, and I just hope that it's going to work out. I gotta be with somebody. Nobody wants to be lonely. Everybody wants to experience love. So whatever you are, just do it. And I'll try to organize myself to fit what you are. Problem is that what Virgo ends up finding is that there are patterns in themselves and patterns in the other person that don't aesthetically, harmoniously work. And Virgos have to learn to communicate it. And this is tricky for them because Venus is debilitated in the 1st house and exalted in the 7th house. So for them, the nature of Venus, they can afford it to the other person. They can serve the other person, but it ends up burning themselves a little bit. So Virgos really, there's a lot of things indicating the same thing here. Ultimately, what comes down to is that Virgos really need to learn about boundaries. How to convey boundaries, how to communicate them, and how to open the communication of exploring what your boundaries ought to be with your partner. Again, we've got a lot to go through here, but this is a theme that you really want to consider, and that's going to be what I keep bringing it down to. When we think of practical relationship things that all relationships need to abide by, this is the kind of work that Virgo needs to do because it's objective. It has nothing to do with, there's going to be your nature and there's going to be your partner's nature, but all humans have basic rights, and the self in one is the self in all. There's going to be basic relationship communication operatives that all relationships need to abide by. Mutual self-respect, but also respect for the other person, respect for each other's boundaries, and communicating desired boundaries, desired ways of communicating, love languages. This kind of stuff is this kind of stuff that Virgo needs to get the knowledge on and then apply it with their partner. Even if it feels like if you are watching this video and all of a sudden you find that you resonate with what is being said here and you want to apply yourself more consciously to these aspects of relationship that you might not have ever realized are very much a Virgo thing. Don't go thinking that your partner is a bad partner just because you're a Virgo rising. What you got to do is recognize that there are things that you have to learn in order to communicate your boundaries in a foundationally strong way in relationships, and read those things. And then tell your partner, I've realized that there are things in our relationship for me that I want to abide with more communication. And then talk with your partner about it. Depending on how your Jupiter is, your partner should be open to it because you've been open to them about making space for them. But ultimately, this is something that every Virgo should do. Learn about universal statutes of relationship harmony, apply them, and apply them in the darling way that Virgo does. Honey, I'm doing this because I think it's good for me, and ultimately what's good for either of us individually is good for us in the relationship overall, which means it will be good for your partner if you do what's good for you, my Virgo friend. Do it, and do it in order for you to be happy, because that's probably what your partner ultimately wants. Now, Venus, the lord of the 2nd and 9th houses, is debilitated in the 1st house. This makes Virgos fastidious about food, the 2nd house, and they also can be nitpicky about their terms of endearment in marriage. Venus also rules the 9th house. Like natives of Gemini rising, it's Mercury's other Rashi, Virgos are also inclined in religious matters, the 9th house, to be more ruled by their heads than by their hearts, particularly because Venus, who's debilitated in Virgo, in the rising sign here, signifies emotions. So a lot of Virgos just decide to go by a religion that seems to make the most sense, and a lot of them can even be atheistic or just very dry about it. But if you have a well-placed Venus here, if you've got things that are good for your Venus, you can actually be conducive to a very discerning but ultimately a bhakti type of person, because Venus rules the 9th house. Virgo risings can make great religious, like Mother Teresa types, who just abide by their given religion for the bhakti nature of it. The love nature, the feeling of loving, serving. You know, Virgos serve the people around them in a lot of the ways. That's how they gain friends and even financial help in the 2nd house, is by helping people in the 9th house. The religious, super conscious house is connected to the 9th and the 2nd. Again, we're going to talk about that. Mars, who is the enemy of the Lagna Lord Mercury, right? Mercury has Mars for one of its... Is the enemy of the Lagna Lord Mercury? This is one that's sort of... I think this is debated amongst different folks here. I don't think Mars is necessarily an enemy. Mercury is an enemy to Mars, but Mars isn't necessarily an enemy to Mercury. Mars is neutral to Mercury, but Mars is ultimately always a tough planet for Virgo and Gemini. Now, Mars is the worst graha. It's the worst planet for Virgo rising, because it rules both the inauspicious 3rd and the powerful 8th house. And the 3rd and 8th are both houses of longevity and death. And these are both dasthanas. These are houses that cause difficulty and even illness. The 8th house rules both accidents and surgery. And Mars is the significator of violence as a natural planet. Sometimes it's by accident, and sometimes it's by cutting, sharpness of Mars. So since the 3rd and the 8th are both tinged by the influence of Mars, Virgo natives have a distinct propensity for mishaps and surgery. And so there's a general need for Virgos to be careful with anything, with brash decisions, with cutting things out, and with sharp objects in general. They can be a bit fuzzy when it comes to their motor skills. They can be very exact and specific and detailed when using their motor skills. Like, Virgos make great mechanics, because, the mechanic is the guy who's bending their spine, getting that certain type of wrench, getting it in there, and they don't need to be perfect. They just need to get it on that thing, tighten, 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 and they can get it. They can do that kind of stuff. And even a Virgo rising, if they have a very good Mars, they can make a great surgeon. But for the most part, most Virgos should be aware that Mars ruling the 3rd and the 8th has this sort of energy from the 8th house with regard to 3rd house things that can make them need to be careful when it comes to mishaps, using sharp objects, etc. So that was an interesting reading that comes from Light on Life. A lot of the stuff in here can be very, very good.